The dollar felt heavy in Silas Crow's palm, heavier than it should. Dust hung thick in the town office, catching the last light through a cracked window. The clerk watched him with wide, waiting eyes, like a man watching a dog walk toward a snake. "You sure about this, mister?" the clerk asked again. Silas did not answer. Instead, he did the one thing nobody in that room expected. He laughed. It was a short, rough laugh, the kind that had not been used in years and creaked like an old door. The clerk flinched. Two men by the stove stopped talking. A woman near the door pulled her shawl tighter and stared, her mouth open, like Silas had just spit on the Bible. "Something funny?" the clerk asked, his voice thin. "Folks in this town," Silas said, still smiling, "sell a whole ranch for $1 and act surprised when a man wants to buy it." He turned the coin over in his fingers, slow, like he was studying a fish he had caught. "Seems to me the ranch ain't cursed. Seems to me this town is just scared of its own shadow." Someone near the stove muttered under his breath. The word "fool" floated across the room, plain enough for Silas to hear. He did not flinch. He set the dollar down on the desk hard, so it rang once against the wood. "You'll be dead in a month," the clerk whispered. Silas leaned forward close enough that the clerk could smell campfire smoke on his coat. "Mister," he said, "I've slept next to bears. I've walked through snow up to my chest. I've gone 20 years without a warm bed or a kind word." His voice dropped low, steady as a held breath. "A haunted barn don't scare me one bit." Nobody laughed now. The clerk's hand shook as he slid the paper across the desk. Silas signed his name in big, plain letters, the pen scratching loud in the quiet room. Outside, the wind picked up, throwing dust against the window like something was trying to get in, or warning something to stay out. Silas folded the paper, tucked it in his coat, and walked out without looking back once. Behind him, the whole room stood frozen, watching the door swing shut, wondering what kind of man walks toward a curse and calls it nothing but dust. The barn door hung open just a crack, black as a closed eye. Silas stood outside it with his rifle low, his breath fogging in the cold night air. Something had moved in there, something big. He took one slow step forward. The old wood groaned under his boot. Then he heard it breathing, deep and shaky, like something trying hard not to be heard. "Who's in there?" Silas called out. His voice did not shake, even though his stomach felt tight as a fist. Nothing answered, just the wind pushing through the broken boards. Silas pushed the door wider. It screamed on its old hinges. Moonlight spilled across the dirt floor, and that was when he saw it, a shape in the far corner, huddled small against the wall. Small did not fit right, though. Even curled up tight, the shape was taller than his mule, taller than his cabin door. He should have run. Any smart man would have run. Instead, Silas did the last thing anyone would expect. He lowered his rifle to the ground. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said, setting the gun down slow, like laying a baby in a crib. Then he sat. Right there in the dirt, boots crossed, hands empty and open on his knees, like a man settling in for a long talk with an old friend. A gasp came from the shadows, a real gasp, shaky and human. You're not running," a voice said. It rumbled low like far-off thunder, but it trembled too, soft and scared underneath. "Never been much for running," Silas said. Slowly the shape unfolded itself. Up, higher than the barn door. A girl stood there, but no ordinary girl. Her shoulders nearly touched the roof beams. Her hands were the size of shovel blades. Tangled hair hung around a face wet with tears, and her eyes, wide and glassy in the moonlight, watched him the way a beaten dog watches a raised hand. "Please," she whispered, "don't scream, don't tell the town." Silas looked up at her, steady and calm, like she was no bigger than a bird on a fence post. "I ain't one for screaming," he said. "Name's Silas, what's yours?" The giant girl's lip trembled. Nobody had asked her name in years. "Hazel," she said softly. "My name is Hazel." And in that broken old barn, under a cold and watching moon, The fear between them began slowly to break apart. The fire had burned low between them, just a few orange coals in the dark. Hazel sat with her knees pulled up, her huge shoulders shaking, though no sound came out. Silas watched her for a long moment before he spoke. "You don't have to tell me," he said quietly, "but I'd like to know." Hazel wiped her face with the back of one giant hand. When she spoke, her voice was small, too small for someone so big. "They came at night," she said, "cattle thieves, running from the law. They found my mama and papa and pointed guns at them." Her hands curled into fists on her knees. "I was scared. I stood up between them and the men, that's all. I just stood there." Silas said nothing. He let the silence hold. "The men ran off screaming about a monster," Hazel went on. "But Papa got hurt in the fighting, and then the sickness came. Days later they were both gone." Her voice cracked, thin as old paper. "I hid in this barn. I never really came out again." Silas felt something twist hard in his chest. He had heard plenty of sad stories in 20 years alone in the mountains. This one sat heavier than most. "That wasn't a monster's doing," he said, firm and slow so she would hear every word. "That was a scared child trying to save her mama and papa. That's not shameful, that's brave." Hazel shook her head hard, tears falling fast now. "Then why does everyone run? Why does everyone call me a monster?" "Because people fear what they don't understand," Silas said. "I know that better than most. 20 years and folks in town still look at me like I'm half wild myself." For a long moment, Hazel just stared at him. Then, slow and careful, she reached out one huge hand and set it gently near his boot, not touching, just close. A small thing, but it was the first time in years she had let herself get close to anyone at all. Silas did not pull away. The next morning, without a word, Hazel picked up a fallen fence post that had crushed part of the barn roof for years. She lifted it like it weighed nothing at all and set it aside. Silas watched her, quiet and amazed. Piece by piece, the ranch began to breathe again, and piece by piece so did they. Hoofbeats shook the ground before Silas even saw them. Then torches, a dozen of them, cutting through the orange evening light like angry fireflies. Otis Dunn rode in front, his face hard, his men close behind. "Crow," Otis shouted, "we know what you're hiding. Step aside or burn with it." Silas stood alone at the gate, his heart pounding hard against his ribs. "There's no monster here," he said, "just a girl who lost everything." "Liar," Otis raised his torch high. "Burn it down, boys." That was when the barn door creaked open behind him. Hazel stepped out, full and tall, her shadow stretching long across the dirt. Horses reared. Men gasped. One rider nearly fell from his saddle, every torch lifted higher, ready. "See," Otis roared, "a monster just like I said." This was the moment everyone waited for. The moment the monster was supposed to roar back, or run, or fight. Hazel did none of that. Instead, slowly, she lowered herself down onto one knee, bringing her huge frame level with the frightened men. She opened both her hands wide, empty, showing she carried no weapon at all. "Please," she said, her big voice trembling but soft. "I'm not a monster. I lost my mama and papa on this land. I've only ever been scared and alone. I never wanted to hurt anybody." Nobody moved. Nobody expected tears on a giant's face. Then it happened, the thing nobody, not the mob, not Silas, not even Hazel herself, saw coming. Otis's horse reared back hard in fear, throwing him off balance, about to crash him down onto sharp rocks below. Hazel moved fast. One huge hand shot out and caught the horse's bridle, steady and gentle, stopping the fall before it happened. She had just saved the very man who rode in to burn her home to the ground. Otis sat frozen, staring up at her, his torch shaking in his hand. Slowly, he lowered it to the dirt. "Why," he whispered, "why save me?" Hazel wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Because a monster would have let you fall," she said. "I didn't want to be that. I just wanted to be someone worth caring about." One by one, the other men lowered their torches too, shame replacing the fire in their eyes. Silas walked up beside her, resting one hand on her huge arm. "This is Hazel," he said, "and she belongs here." For the first time in years, Hazel smiled.